What's up guys, Atapark here, and today we are going to do something brand new on this channel. Because I've been asked to do this by some guild members, some friends of mine, and by a few of you, I want to start putting together some class guides on this channel for you guys. So the goal here is to get you straight into playing the class and playing the spec. So while admittedly that I will go over as much as I can, my goal here is to make this a very quick guide. I want you to get rolling into that spec as quickly as possible. So this isn't going to be an amazing resource if you are looking for a incredibly detailed explanation of every single ability and every single piece of math, etc. Because there are so many better resources out there that can provide it more detailed, quicker, more professionally, etc. My goal here is to get you guys to play a class or a spec and just get right into it. Now, with that being said, I have played the majority. In fact, I've played in a raid situation all of the classes and almost all of the specs, but some of them are far better geared than others. You know, my druid, my paladin, my mage, obviously. Some of them I have not played, and they are distant alts that I haven't even thought about. So keep that in mind, that some of these guides may come very quickly if you guys enjoy them, whereas others I need to put a little bit of gearing work on the side into before I'm comfortable talking about them, and I want to get reacquainted with them. So with all that being said, let's talk today about the Guardian Druid. This is what I mained for a good portion of the Legion expansion until I switched over to my mage. So the Guardian Druid fills in the raid the role of tank. It is the one getting punched in the face, and is generally known for two big things. One, an incredibly large health pool, and two, a lot of AoE abilities. It is also, as far as tanks go, it is a top tier tank. Almost this entire expansion, we'll see when the next raid comes out, but presumably it will be top tier tank for the entirety of this expansion. It's been a pretty good tank thus far for a long time now. If you're going to play a Guardian Druid, you want to keep in mind that you're going to benefit from the following. One, tons of raid utility. You have a very easy to get rolling into spec, but admittedly it is a little bit more difficult to master. But it's easy to play. There are plenty of opportunities for you to kind of switch it up. So if maybe you log on an off night and you want to heal something, you want to DPS something as a ranged or a melee, boom, you have the specs there available in your class, and you don't need to gear up an entirely new class and spec for that main purpose. And in my opinion, the bear skins, I know a lot of people give some grief over the Harambe or the Banjo-Kazooie skins. I like them. I think the glowy skins are really cool, and as someone that played a Guardian Druid or a Feral Druid back in the day, having the ability to not look like a stupid brown bear for the entire expansion is really cool. However, keep in mind that the spec is very easy to play wrong. Because it's so easy to get into, a lot of players will think that they're doing decent, and I partially made this mistake starting out in Legion. But the spec's very easy to get wrong. That while not really a problem anymore, it could still be potentially disastrous or off-putting to overextend your artifact power with 4 specs. So you want to put a little bit into Resto, you want to put a little bit into Feral, and a little bit into Balance, and suddenly you find that everybody else in your raid has, several ranks more of Concordance of Legion fall than you do, because you've been kind of overextending. So keep that in mind, and that while the spec is very easy to get into, to master this spec, you're going to need to remember that all of your abilities and all of your shapeshifted forms can put you at disadvantages. So they can leave you vulnerable if you hit the wrong ability or use the wrong spell at the worst possible time. So let's talk about your abilities. Your artifact weapon ability, Rage of the Sleeper, comes from your Claws of Ursoc. This is one of, if not the best, the coolest, the most amazing artifact weapon abilities, if not just abilities in general, in the entire game. So for 10 seconds after you use this ability, you will prevent 25% of the damage that you take, and you will reflect damage back at your attacker. Now, I'll say this here, and hopefully I don't have to say it again, but because artifact power is so easy to come by, As far as all the extra stuff you get on your weapon, we're just going to lump that in. So you are going to get, for 10 seconds, 25% extra damage. You're going to reflect damage back to all of your attackers. You're going to gain 25% increased leech, and you're going to be completely immune to crowd control effects for 10 seconds. It's on a 90-second cooldown. Amazing ability. Bark Skin, 20% damage reduction, usable when you're CC'd. Dash is a 70% movement speed increase. I'm trying to combine words here. Movement speed increase for 15 seconds. Put you in cat form. 3-minute cooldown. Put you in cat form. Please keep that in mind. Don't put yourself in a vulnerable situation where you are unable to switch back to Guardian because you are CC'd and you get pummeled to death by ads. Entangling Roots, it's a root, 30-second cooldown. Damage takes this away. Frenzy Regen heals you for 50% of the damage you take from the last 5 seconds. But that damage is healed to you over 3 seconds. So, for example, if you take a hit for 200k damage and you pop Frenzy Regen, you are going to take 100k healing over 3 seconds. So about 33k healing every second. You have 3 charges of this. Growl is your taunt. Healing Touch is your default healing spell. Please remember that Healing Touch is a healing spell and will take you out of whatever shapeshifted form that you are in, putting you in a vulnerable situation. Incapacitating Roar, it's a crowd control that incapacitates all enemies within 10 yards for 3 seconds. Damage takes this effect away. Iron Fur increases the armor that you have by 65% for 6 seconds. Keep in mind that this ability stacks. What that means is that, like I said, this ability lasts for 6 seconds. So if you pop an Iron Fur, and then you wait 3 seconds, and you hit that ability again, for those 3 seconds, that first one and that second one overlap, you have 130% additional armor. And then once that first application goes off, it's going to drop back down to 65%. Now, of course, you could get a 3rd stack, you get a 4th stack. So your armor can vary as you are using this ability. Keep that in mind. It does stack. And it is your job as the tank to figure out, okay, am I taking a lot of damage and I really need to start hitting those Iron Furs and making sure that my armor stays up? Or is it okay to conserve that rage, maybe have 1 or 2 stacks up and use it for other abilities? Those other abilities, Mangle, it is a hard-hitting single target spell. 6-second cooldown, generates rage. Use this on cooldown. Keep in mind, it does extra damage to bleeding targets. Maul, it is a hard-hitting single target effect. It is a rage dump. If you, like I said, if Iron Fur is good and you have a lot of extra rage and you're confident that you can get 1 or 2 of these out, go ahead and do it. But be careful. While it does a lot of threat, while it does a lot of damage, it can empty your rage bar very quickly. Moonfire is a damage over time ability. It's useful to pull mobs with this. You want to make sure that you keep this debuff on mobs at all time. Over the course of an entire fight, this adds up to a lot of damage. Prowl, it's your stealth in cat form. In cat form, please keep that in mind. Remove Corruption. It removes all curse, all poison effect. 8-second cooldown. Rebirth is your battle res, useful in combat. Revive is your resurrection. Please remember that you have a healing off spec. So you have a resurrection. Don't be that jerk that isn't willing to resurrect anybody. Skull Bash is your interrupt on a 15-second cooldown. Also keep in mind that Skull Bash charges you forward slightly. It's not a huge charge, but you can definitely close the gap if you have a few yards between you and your target and interrupt them. Or simply just charge at them if they are not a caster. Stampeding Roar, this is what I was talking about, that amazing raid utility. You give to all friendly targets within that 10-yard radius 60% speed increase for 8 seconds. Amazing. Survival Instincts is a flat 50% damage reduction. You have 2 charges. It is on a very long 3-minute cooldown. Swipe, it is an AoE spell. It is used one of 2 ways. One, as a filler spell if Moonfire is on all your targets, if Mangle is on cooldown, if Thrash is on cooldown, you just want to fill it with Swipe. Or during AoE situations, obviously use this ability, but it is a filler spell, generates no rage. Thrash is also an AoE ability, huge damage. Puts a bleed on all the targets that you hit. AoE ability. Use this one on cooldown. So let's talk about your passive abilities. There's two that I want to keep in mind here. One is Gore. Gore has a 20% chance to proc when you hit a target with a Thrash, a Swipe, a Moonfire, or a Maul. It has the ability to reset Mangle, and then that subsequent Mangle is going to generate additional range. Make sure you're tracking your cooldowns for this. Make sure you're tracking when Mangle is able to be cast. Your second one here, your Mastery, Nature's Guardian. Simply put, increases health, increases healing, increases attack power. That's how Guardian Druids are able to get these huge health pools, because their Mastery directly just increases their health. So let's then take a look at the talents that are going to kind of change, alter, and really affect your gameplay and the spells that you have. So for tier 1, you have Brambles, Bristling Fur, and Blood Frenzy. Brambles, every time you get hit, you reflect damage, and when Bark Skin is up, you deal AoE damage to all nearby enemies. Bristling Fur generates rage based on the damage that you take for 8 seconds. It's on a 40-second cooldown. And Blood Frenzy, Thrash generates extra rage when it does damage. So, Bristling Fur is a cool ability. I like the thought behind it that you have this thorns. It's thorns from way back in the day, those of you that have played, before it was taken out. But it's essentially thorns that every time you get hit, you deal damage. And it's cool, but Bristling Fur and Blood Frenzy is just so significantly better. Bristling Fur is a great on-demand rage generation ability. If you know that you're going to take a ton of damage and you need to get a ton of Iron Fur stacks out, for example, Fell Claws during Kill Jayton, you can pop Bristling Fur, and as he is hitting you, you're generating a ton of rage, and you're then generating so many stacks of Iron Fur that it makes it significantly easier to deal with that mechanic. Blood Frenzy, great passive ability. You generate rage when your Thrash deals damage. Easy peasy. Brambles, meh. So tier 2, you have Guttural Roars, Intimidating Roar, and Wild Charge. Now, Guttural Roars increases the radius of Stampeding Roar and Incapacitated Roar. And it reduces the cooldown on Stampeding Roar. This is an amazing talent. You have Intimidating Roar replaces Incapacitating Roar with Intimidating Roar. It disorients all enemies within 20 yards, and Wild Charge gives you a movement ability depending on your form. Right now, we're just going to talk about Bear form, which is it gives you a charge ability. So, Intimidating Roar is cool if you need a little bit more CC. However, you're going to gain so much more, in my opinion, with Guttural Roars, and then a decent amount of movement with Wild Charge. So Guttural Roars is amazing. It is great for Mythic Plus dungeons, and Wild Charge gives you just a little bit more movement speed if you need to get to a target faster. Intimidating Roar, cool if you need CC, but Guttural Roars is just going to win out the majority of the time. Tier 3, you have your affinity spells, Balance, Feral, and Restoration. So these are fairly easy. Balance, it increases the range of your abilities, gives you access to Moonkin spells. Feral Affinity, increases your movement speed by 15%, gives you access to Feral abilities. Restoration Affinity, gives you a passive heal, and you get access to Restoration abilities. So, Feral Affinity is nice. 15% movement speed is nothing to scoff at, but while you do, as a very advanced player, have the ability to kind of cat weave, where you can, maybe if you're off tanking, switch to cat, get a little bit of DPS out there, switch back into bear form. Possible to do. In my opinion, you get a lot more out of either balance or restoration affinity. So if you are doing progression fights, if you're concerned about your health, your healing, the damage that you're taking, if you want to help the healers a little bit, if you want to help the raid a little bit, the restoration affinity is great because it gives you a 1.5% of the health that you have is going to heal every 5 seconds. And if you're at full health, that heal will heal someone else. It adds up over the course of a fight. If you're comfortable with your healers, you can switch to balance affinity. This just increases the range of all of your abilities. Very cool for picking up adds, very cool for hitting targets. that are outside of normal melee range because you get extra, I think it's 5 yards on your abilities. So both are perfect choices, nothing wrong with them. I think Feral Affinity kind of lags a little bit behind. Tier 4 is your crowd control tier. You have Mighty Bash, Mass Entanglement, and Typhoon. Mighty Bash is a single target stun, 50-second cooldown. Mass Entanglement roots all enemies within 15 yards. Damage can cancel these effects. And Typhoon is an AoE knockback and then a disorient on a 30-second cooldown. So while Mass Entanglement is cool, it roots enemies in place. So while useful in some instances, the dragons in Emerald Nightmare is probably the first thing that comes to mind. Mighty Bash, where you have a on-demand 50-second cooldown, single target stun, or Typhoon, where you can knock things around and disorient them. Both of those just significantly more useful. Both are good choices. Mass Entanglement, again, is going to be overshadowed by the other two. Tier 5, you have Soul of the Forest, Incarnation, Guardian of Elune, and Galactic Guardian. So, Soul of the Forest. Mangle generates more rage, deals more damage. Incarnation, Guardian of Elune, is a beefed up bear form. You reduce the cooldown of all of your melee abilities and growl to 1.5 seconds. Mangle is now an AoE ability, hitting up to 3 targets, and your armor is increased by 15%. Galactic Guardian, damage you deal has a 7% chance to trigger a Moonfire on your target. Every time this happens, the next Moonfire that you cast will generate more rage and does a significantly larger amount of damage. So, Incarnation is amazing if you need on-demand extra armor, on-demand extra damage. If you need AoE, that is an amazing spell. But it's on a huge cooldown, 3 minutes. Galactic Guardian is great for constant AoE because you're talking about all of your AoE abilities, Swipe and Thrash, are going to generate damage, which means that if you thrash something and you put that bleed on them, there's a chance every time that bleed happens to pop your Galactic Guardian. Plus, it's a really cool name for an ability. And the damage that you do by Moonfire is significantly higher, and it increases the amount of rage you generate so much significantly more. And it looks cool. So, Incarnation is really good if you need AoE or extra armor. Galactic Guardian is great for, in general, just damage and rage generation. And Soul of the Forest is going to lag behind significantly because Mangle generates more rage, deals more damage. Cool. Or 7% of all the damage that you deal is going to hit a Moonfire on any target that does damage. It's less to think about. You get so much more out of it. Both Incarnation and Galactic Guardian, probably Galactic Guardian being the default, are just going to overshadow Soul of the Forest. Tier 6. This is more of your survival tier. You have Earth Warden, Guardian of Elune, and Survival of the Fittest. So Earth Warden, Thrash gives a charge of Earth Warden, which reduces the damage that you take from the next auto attack by 30%. Guardian of Elune, Mangle increases the duration of Iron Fur or the healing done by Frenzied Regen. And Survival of the Fittest reduces the cooldown of Barkskin and Survival Instincts by 33%. So, Guardian of Elune is probably going to be your default choice because it really benefits you to have a constant uptime of Iron Fur. I think it's 2 extra seconds, and you get, 20% extra healing on Frenzied Regen. Survival of the Fittest is good if you need more cooldowns. If you are maybe, you're really pushing that high end progression. You feel like you're taking a lot of damage and you want Barkskin and Survival Instincts off cooldown a lot quicker. But Guardian of Elune is just going to it's just significantly better. And Earth Warden, 30% of the attacks that you take, or 30% damage reduction from auto attacks when you deal damage with Thrash. Auto attacks, it's not worth it. The amount of damage that you're going to reduce is just not significant enough. And Tier 7, the last tier here, Rend and Tear, Lunar Beam, and Pulverize. So, Rend and Tear, Thrash increases the damage you do to the target and reduces the damage you take by 2% per application. If you have I think it's the legs, the legendary legs, where you can now apply 5 stacks of Rend and Tear as opposed to 3 stacks by default, this is an amazing talent. Lunar Beam deals damage and heals you for 8 seconds. It's on a 75-second cooldown. Pulverize. It is a large damage ability, but it removes 2 stacks, which means you obviously have to have at least 2 stacks of Thrash on your target. It reduces the damage that you take by 9% for 20 seconds. So if we're doing our math here, if you have the legendary legs, it is going to benefit you to have Rend and Tear, because now you have 10% damage reduction on everything that Rend and Tear or Thrash is on, as long as 5 stacks are on it. And you're going to be dealing more damage. So this is really a great tier because every single choice is useful. Rend and Tear is a great passive ability. Pulverize reduces the amount of damage you take without legendaries a little bit more, but it also eats up some of your damage, your stacks of Thrash. And Lunar Beam is really good if you need a short-ish 75-second AoE damage and healing cooldown. Useful for Mythic Plus. So now, with all that being said, guys, hopefully this guide was enough to get you rolling into playing your Guardian Druid. If you guys did or did not like anything, let me know in the comments below so I can fix it for the next guide for you guys. Until next time, I'll see ya.